I had a conversation with Bill the other day. He called me up and said that he needed a website. And he'd looked online, and there were just so many options. He kind of got overwhelmed and very confused and asked if I could help. Now, I have been involved in building websites since the mid-90s. I was right in there with Front Page and basic coding from the start. I consider myself incredibly lucky. So I've been able to see kind of the entire, trajectory of websites, web development, throughout the years. So sure, I would offer a few insights into some recommendations that he might want to consider in getting his website up and running for his woodworking business. So the first thing I asked him is, what do you need your website to do? And he thought about this for a while, and he said the most important thing that he wants is a way for his customers to find him and for new customers to find him. And I asked his level of skill when it comes to computers and, programming and things like that. And he said he can operate a computer, but as far as programming or web design skills, he has virtually none. Okay, that is a real good place to start. And if you've been struggling with coming up with a website for your business, I think I can help you and answer some of your questions and at least get you pointed in the right direction in this episode, number 30, How to Build a Website for Your Woodworking Business. My name is Roger Kugler. This is Working at Woodworking Podcast. And I know that this is a really hard thing to do if you've never done it. But hey, come on, hand-cut dovetails are not the easiest thing to do when you've never done them before either. Now, you've probably mastered hand-cut dovetails, and if you have, I am quite sure that you can build your own website. Now, Bill has a great idea. He already has a good idea of what he wants, and I praise him for tackling this. If you have a business, you need a website. And by the way, Facebook is not a business website. Technically, it's referred to as a business page. People are not going to find you on the World Wide Web if you have a Facebook page. Can you survive with just a Facebook page? Hey, if you have more work than you can handle right now and you have a Facebook page, good for you. Keep with it. But if you are trying to really formulate a marketing strategy for your business to get your name out there, and I think the greatest advantage of having a website is legitimacy. Anybody can have a Facebook page. It takes a little more to have a website where people can find you. So let's take a deep dive in this. I'm going to list out 3 things that you need to do right offhand to get you started on building a website. Number 1, you need to figure out what you want. Now, Bill mentioned that he wanted a website so that people could find him. That's great. And later in our conversation, he also threw in the little nugget that, oh yeah, I'd also like to sell a few products. Okay, that raises the level of complexity a little bit, but we can easily get over that. So I kind of break a website for a woodworking business down into 3 general categories. There's the billboard website. This is, as the name implies, you on the internet. It's a billboard. It lists information about you and what you do. Your name, probably your address, your phone number, contact information, maybe a little about me, a biography page, and I would recommend lots of photos. And these don't have to be world-class, National Geographic quality photos. You can pull out your cell phone and take pictures of things and use those on your website. Sometimes I think that actually gives a little more authenticity to a site as opposed to paying someone several thousands of dollars, to a professional photographer to come in and do these studio shots. Anyway, you could also have a billboard and sell a few items. That's where Bill is right now. Or you could develop a e-commerce site, a juggernaut with hundreds of items. I don't think most of you are there, and we're just going to kind of skim over that part. I think most people are going to want to take the easy route and get a billboard up. Just get something on the internet. The billboard and with a little bit of e-commerce, that's moderately difficult, but not bad at all. That juggernaut website, you really need to know what you're doing there, and it is going to be more difficult. But let's not go there right now. I think the most important thing that you can do if you are looking for a website is to figure out exactly what you want this website to look like. Now, you've done this before. You have cruised the web for hours and hours, and you've seen all kinds of different websites. You know what you like, you know what you don't like. So I really would like you to get a piece of paper, maybe a yellow pad, and draw your website. People who I work with, this is exactly what we do. Draw out your website. You want to include your logo, you want to include any text, and you want to include photos. And to be quite honest, this is about half the job in developing your website. If you sit down and just start developing a website, you could end up with a real hodgepodge. You're going to have to go through this process sooner or later. So let's do this right now. And it's a good time to employ some other people in your household and get their opinions. What do they like in a website? What don't they like in a website? And again, do some research. Look at other people's websites and other craftsmen, other people who are doing exactly what you're doing, and figure out what you like and put that in your picture. If you don't have a logo, well, you're going to have to do that before you build your website. You don't have any photos, you're going to have to get the photos before you build your website. So this is kind of the kickstart. This is the beginning. This is how you get moving. Once you have that collected, you need to answer a very important question. And I don't mean to be flippant about this, but give this a lot of consideration. Do you want to build the website, or do you want to hire someone to build your website? There's pros and cons both ways. If you do it yourself, you're going to have minimal financial outlay. If you hire someone to do this, depending where you live, what you want, what your local market's like, you should look at between $2,000 and $6,000 roughly to have a professional build your website. Sounds like a lot of money, but how much money could you be making in your shop instead of sitting behind a computer building your website? Is this something that you have an interest in? Is this something that you would rather have root canal? Everyone's different. I like web design simply because it gets me away from the sawdust and kind of clears some of the sawdust out between my ears. Maybe you have a nephew who could develop a website. That could be good. That could be bad. Nephews have a tendency of getting on with their life, so to speak, and your website becomes the very last priority in their lives. It also could be a learning experience for your nephew. So just treat that with kid gloves, well, literally, because it could be good, it could not be so good. Okay, you have decided that you want to build your own website. And don't think of this as taking 40 hours over the next, 2 months or something like that. It's really not that hard once you get started. And really, collecting those photos having your logo, having some idea of what you want. That's a lot of the work. Your job right now is to select a platform to build your website on. And this is where we're going to take a pretty deep dive, so hang on. Before we go any further, it is time for definitions. What is a website? Obviously, a website is something that exists on the World Wide Web where you can put your information so other people can find it. That doesn't happen automatically. You have to find someone to host your website. Someone with a computer that is set up as a server to connect to the internet. And we call these hosting services. Inside that hosting service, you have to have a name for your website. That's called the domain, or the domain name. bobscabinetshop.com. That's the domain name. So the web host uses your domain name to serve up your web pages on their servers. How do they do that? They use a thing called DNS. This is a system of creating a directory, an index of your name, bobscabinetshop.com, with an IP address, Internet Protocol address. And that's going to be something like 168.092.32.18. That would be pretty horrible to type in to your browser every time you want to go visit that particular website, bobscabinetshop.com. Thankfully, the DNS, the domain name server, has this already figured out. So when you type in bobscabinetshop.com, it goes to the domain name server, looks it up, and says, oh, that IP address is 168. So on and so forth. Okay, simple, right? We have a website, we have a domain, we have a domain name server, and we have a hosting service. If you want to do e-commerce, that's just another layer that we add to your website. So how do we actually get this stuff done? There's two primary ways. The one that I think you should concentrate on now is called SaaS, Software as a Service. These are sites that allow you to go in and easily build your website. They take care of the vast majority of all the nuts and bolts of a website. There's another system called CMS, Content Management System, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. You might also come across the term open source. Open source is a system of writing programs and functions that allow people to do wonderful things on the internet for free without having to pay anyone anything. Literally, these are people who contribute their time and their expertise to creating something that anyone can use. And I've talked in other podcasts about open source software. Right now, I am recording this podcast using Audacity. Audacity is an open source software. It's free. You can download it from the web. You can use it on a Windows machine, a Mac, or a Linux machine. Speaking of Linux, Linux is an open source operating system. So you don't have to pay Microsoft or Apple for the operating system. You can download the operating system yourself, put it on your machine, and say bye-bye to all those annoying things that crop up with Windows or Apple. Another term that you're going to read about or hear about is SEO. That stands for Search Engine Optimization. This is really important, but I don't want you to get bogged down into this. Search engine optimization is the way your website is found on the internet. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. And the last term that you may come across that will probably confuse you is SSL. That stands for Secure Socket Layers. when you are on your browser and you look up the URL line, the address line, and you see HTTPS, that means that that website is using a secure socket layer to encrypt transmissions between that server and your computer. This is a really, really, really good thing. And in essence, today, websites don't really function well without an SSL. It's a way of increasing privacy, increasing protection, and reducing hackers. So that's a good thing. We'll talk about all of these terms here in a few minutes, and you're going to come across this. I hope you wrote these all down and took notes, and no, you didn't do that. Okay, so let's start talking about the individual software as a service platforms that you could use to build a website. You've seen these: Wix, Squarespace, Square, Shopify, GoDaddy. I mean, there are tons out there. This is what Bill was having such a problem with, was there was just so many. And of course, every one of them is the best. So how do you sort all this stuff out? Okay, I'm going to make this simple. Well, I'm going to make this as simple for you as I possibly can. We're going to kind of limit our criteria to paid websites. No freebies. Well, actually, except one. The freebie websites would be something like Wix, where you can build a free website for no money down. And literally, you can build a free website on some of these platforms. I would not recommend you do that as your business website, because every one of your customers will know that you are either too poor or too cheap to build a proper website. And that's going to be a big negative when it comes to your public image. They use a lot of self-promotion advertising on it, and it's just tacky. Please don't do that. There's one exception, and that is Google Sites. Now, you know that Google is taking over the world, will eventually morph into Skynet, and, well, you know how that story goes. But for now, Google offers a lot of really powerful applications for free. Things like spreadsheets and word processors and presentation software like PowerPoint, all through their Documents program. One of the services is called Google Sites. This is a way that you can build a pretty decent looking website for absolutely free, and they don't plaster the thing with advertising. I built a little test site using it, and I was impressed. It's not bad at all. If you have ever used PowerPoint, it's pretty much the exact same thing, where you have a text box, you type in, why you should buy custom cabinets, and you've got your header up there, and then you can write out your text below that, and you create a image window, and you drag and drop your image into that. It is pretty darn simple. Now, the one caveat with using Google Sites is connecting your domain name with Google Sites is a little arduous. And a good way of getting around that is to simply get your domain name from Google. And I switched over, a year ago, 2 years ago, to Google domains, and it's $12 a year, and it's been relatively smooth, and I've been very, very happy with them. Now, you could also use another SaaS, such as Wix. Very large company. They've been in the internet game for, pretty much since the internet game started. You can get a free website with Wix. I would not recommend it. Or for a few bucks, you can get a very nice looking website with your own domain. A lot of these free websites will have something like bobscabinetshop.wix.com. And that's a little messy. In fact, that's a good example of one of the URLs that you get on the free website. Some of them are just awful. Everybody has heard of WordPress. Should you have a WordPress website? Okay, WordPress is a little unique. It is technically a content management system. You can build some really big websites with WordPress. You can make some nice looking websites with WordPress. You can make some pretty crappy websites using WordPress. Quite honestly, I would not recommend you to use WordPress. You need to know some coding. It's not the easiest, most intuitive system to use. There are some other issues with WordPress that I'll spare you of today, but my general recommendation would not be to go with WordPress. If you are thinking about it, be aware that there are two types of WordPress. There's WordPress.com and there's WordPress.org. WordPress is an open source software. It's free to use from WordPress.org. WordPress.com is a hosting site that utilizes WordPress. Got it? Simple? And WordPress.com is not horrible, but just be aware that there is a monthly fee because they are hosting a website. If you use Google Sites, they are hosting the website. They are taking care of all those servers and all that background information and all the DNS entries and so on and so forth. They are also including an SSL, that secure socket layer. See where these definitions are starting to come in? They're including all of that in the case of Google Sites for free. If you're using Wix, they're including all of the SSL, the DNS, all of that stuff for free. Another site I think you should consider is Square. With Square, low monthly cost, you can build a billboard. Looks very nice, very easy to build. Very much the PowerPoint type thing of drag and drop, put this here, type this in here, insert this image, put this photo here, move it a little bit more to the left. You can do that and build the site exactly the way you want it to look. But what if you want to sell a few things? Well, I'm going to go right back to Square. Because if you remember in the earlier podcast about the point of sale system, I had recommended Square very highly for their card reader and their easy point of sale system. For a monthly fee, you can go ahead and build a website using Square and incorporate e-commerce right into your site. You can also use Squarespace. Now, Squarespace is a very powerful platform. You can do a lot of really, really neat things. Maybe too many things. It can get a little confusing, maybe a little overwhelming. That's why I kind of lean towards the Square. I think it's a little cleaner, a little more simple. You might not be able to do some of the things that you could do with Squarespace, but I'm kind of looking at simplicity here. Remember, Bill said that he doesn't do any coding. So for that, I'm going to kind of give a nod towards Square. But what if you want to build this e-commerce juggernaut where you have 20, 30, 100 products on there? You could certainly do that with Square. No problem. You could certainly do that with Squarespace. No problem. You could also look at Shopify. Shopify has been a real juggernaut in the industry for a number of years. They have done things incredibly well. So it's well worth a look. My one little fault with Shopify is customer service, in my experience, has not been really good. Where with Square, I have found them to be much more communicative, shall we say. So all of this is confusing, I understand. Irregardless of what platform you do choose to build your website with, you are going to find good points about it and bad points about it. There are things that are going to frustrate you on every platform. One platform may do this, the other platform doesn't do this, but it does that. But your platform doesn't do that. And so you can end up going back and forth and splitting hairs. In the end, I would really suggest kind of looking at one and go with it. I mean, we're all in this for the experience anyway. Visit each platform, look around, see what is good, see what, you don't really like or is confusing. But what about cost? Okay. That's how most people are going to end up making their decision. Let's be honest. So for the cost of these different platforms that we've talking about, and there's not very many, I really tried to wean out the other 100 that you could consider and come up with kind of what I consider the cream of the crop. Google Sites, I mentioned, great if you want a billboard. You don't want to do anything else with it. It's very limited, which is good if you are new to this and just getting started. In fact, I would recommend going to Google Sites and just mocking something up and just see how this works. There's Wix. Wix is going to run about $27 a month, but it has some real solid features. There's some people who absolutely love Wix. Other people don't care very much for it. I mean, you can walk into a programmer's, developer's bar, any place, and get into a bar fight over these platforms, one being better than the other. WordPress, that's not my first choice, and I would tend to steer people away from it. Remember that although WordPress is an open source software platform, that means you're going to have to find your own hosting service. You need to find somebody who will actually run the servers that your website is on. And honestly, that's an entirely different podcast that I really don't want to go into today. If you go with WordPress.com, that is a hosting service, and you can set it there. I think they run about, I think they're around $24 a month, something like that. It's been a while since I've looked at them. Square is a website builder that will cost, for a simple billboard type website, about $12 a month. I mean, that's $144 a year. That's not bad at all. In fact, you couldn't find a host for less than that would be worth anything. If you really want to build out your e-commerce platform with them, you're going to probably bump up to about $26 a month. You get a lot of advanced features with that, a lot of really cool bells and whistles that you'll probably find helpful. Squarespace, very well-rounded, very expandable. You can do a lot with that. That's going to cost $23 a month if you pay on the annual plan, plus your transaction fees, that everyone else will charge. $27 a month on the annual plan will get you the commerce package. That includes a lot of the point of sale system via Square, by the way. And when you're cruising these sites and they're giving you these monthly rates, determine if that's actually monthly or if that's annualized. Because like Squarespace, they want you to pay for the entire year. If you want to pay by the month, it's going to cost you about 33% more per month. A lot of these sites will run a promotional, free this or that for 1 year, and then they bump it to like 3 times the market rate. So pay attention to the fine details. And the last one on the list, Shopify, that's about $29 a month plus your transaction fee. And as they say, best for new e-commerce businesses with occasional in-person sales. They were not real strong on the POS side. I gave that to Square. And for most people with a simple website, I'm really kind of leaning towards Square. I think you get a lot of features for a very reasonable price, and everything just kind of seems to work. And when it all comes down to it, you pretty much get what you pay for. If you're getting a bargain basement, $4 a month type thing, well, that's probably exactly what it's worth. If you're paying a little bit more money, then I think you're going to get the features and benefits and the ease of use that will make your site something that you will actually use. Please, please, please do not build a website and forget about it. It's almost, well, in fact, it can be worse than not having a website at all. If you have a copyright line down at the very bottom, copyright by 2022, and it is now 2025, that screams you're not paying attention. And again, that really can affect your image. So if you get a website, you've got to work with it. If you haven't updated anything in the last 2 or 3 years, your ranking as far as Google is concerned is dropping. And Google is weird. Google search, the largest search engine platform in the world. You can't ignore this. You might be a Bing user, I'm sorry, but you're just not competing. Yahoo, yeah, I remember something about a website called Yahoo. Google owns the search engine, not the number one search engine in the world. Guess who the number 2 search engine is in the world? YouTube. Guess who owns YouTube? That's right, Google. So we can't get away from this. We have to learn to work with this. And Google search engine optimization algorithm. Big fancy words that mean when you type something into the Google search bar, how does Google determine what it's going to show you? That's the algorithm part. And SEO, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is really, really important. This is how people will find your website. Fortunately, in our market, in custom woodworking, there's not a lot of people doing this. So when someone types in custom woodworking, my city and state, there's not a lot of options, typically. If you do that in my location, there's like maybe 4. Now, it would be really nice if your website showed up as number 1 on the search engine result page or SERP. But it's not a disaster if it doesn't, because chances are the number 1 is so backed up on work that he can't get to anything anyway, and so they go down the list. You might be, number 4, number 6, but you're still going to get a phone call because there's just so much work out there and there are so few of us. If you look at other industries, the search engine optimization is super, super, super important because there are so many people competing for that SERP page to get on page 1 of the search result. And they spend, well, some places literally tens of thousands of dollars a month to make sure that they get on that first page. We don't have to get quite as fanatical about it because, like I said, there's just fewer of us. But it would be nice to, beat out Bob's Cabinet Shop, wouldn't it? Okay, real quick, to kind of summarize this. Google Sites, drag and drop, simple. I would encourage you to go on and just start playing with it. I mean, it's free. If you don't have your domain yet, look at each one of these sites because most of them do offer domains. And if you get a domain, let's say on Squarespace, that integration is super simple. They're going to do everything for you. If you get your domain from someplace else, then you are going to have to integrate the two. And that can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. Wix, very good, very solid. I wouldn't be afraid of them. WordPress, incredibly powerful, very expandable, a bit clunky, and you really need to know how to use some code if you're going to get into WordPress. Square, I like their POS system. I like their website builder. I think they have really good prices for what they're offering. I would give that a hard look. Squarespace is a very well-rounded, very expandable. You can do all kinds of things on Squarespace. Some things you may never take advantage of, but if they're there, they're there. If you need the point of sale system, which if we're in business, we kind of do, now you're back over to Square to use theirs. Shopify, big juggernaut. And you need to know a little bit of coding if you're going into Shopify. It's not the drag and drop, point and shoot type thing that these other programs are. What about PayPal? Well, remember, PayPal is a third-party payment processor. They don't really build websites. They will work with you on your website to take money from customers, but they don't really get into the website building arena. But hey, Roger, what about coding your own website? Why are you listening to this podcast? If you know how to code, go code. But don't waste your time listening to me ramble on about, these website builders. It's an honest question. Should you learn to code your own website? Yes, if you have an interest in that and you have some time to devote to it, I think it's a wonderful thing. I think knowledge is wonderful to have. If you want to really concentrate on making sawdust and making money, then probably not, because back in the old days of web design, it was pretty simple. But now things have gotten a lot more complicated, and coding has gotten a lot more complicated. And that's why there are all these SaaS websites out there, Squarespace, Square, Wix, so on and so forth, just to make it easier. And here's a dirty little secret. If you hire someone to build you a website, I'm going to say the chances are like 99 out of 100 that they're not going to code the website themselves. They are going to use, wait for it, WordPress, maybe Squarespace. They're going to use one of these other platforms to do all the legwork in building your website. Is that a bad thing? No, not necessarily. The one negative to using these SaaS website builders is that they tend to be a little clunky. They're trying to serve a very wide audience. They're trying to be everything for everyone. And in doing so, they pack in a lot of baggage. And this particularly shows up on site speed and SEO. Site speed is how long does it take your website to download. If you hand code a simple website, it can be literally under a second. Some of these SaaS programs, it's like 3, 4, 5 seconds to get these things to load. Oh, geez, come on. We're just talking about a few seconds here. Well, those few seconds is the difference between your website showing up on page 1 of the SERP, search engine result page, or page 17. I mean, it is that fine in some competitive markets. Like I said, ours is not that competitive. You're going to show up if it takes 10 seconds for your page to load, because there's just not that many of us out there. So I wouldn't get real hung up on that. And there's just kind of an elegance that is involved in hand coding. There's ways that you can do things that are really simple and slick and fully optimized and very, very efficient that you can't get with other platforms. So I don't know. I'm splitting hairs there. Sorry, kind of, diverged. Yes, this is confusing. I hope I tried to break it down for you a little bit. If you want to talk to someone somewhat knowledgeable in this, buy me a cup of coffee, drop me a line, show me some support on Patreon. I would be happy to talk to you. Even if you don't do that, go ahead, feel free, give me a call, shoot me an email. The hardest part about building a website is starting to build a website. Once you get started, once you commit to something, it's kind of, you've got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this. Just like building a kitchen cabinet, you got to start with a drawing. You need to know what this thing needs to look like, what the sizes are, what the dimensions are, and then you start adding things into that. And you do your cut list and your buy list, and you start milling your materials and doing the assembly, and then doing the finishing and installing the hardware and so on and so forth. Website's the exact same way. The hardest thing for most people is to just get started. Recommendations for the week: visit all of these websites that I talked about. Watch a few YouTube videos. One that I found to be very helpful was Jillian Perkins' How to Create a Website for Your Business. A young lady has done a really good job of kind of cutting through a lot of the sales pitches, because these websites are no dummy. They know that if they can get a popular YouTube producer to push their website, they can get a lot of business through that. And of course, the YouTube creators compensated very well for this. So a lot of these are basically commercials, which are in themselves still valuable if you're interested in that particular platform. I think she does a nice job. So give her 10 minutes to watch her video. And of course, if you are still in need of a phone system for your small business, I would encourage you to check out Unitel Voice. The link is in the show notes. Missed jobs? Wow, it has really been busy of late. Lady needed a sign carved. Nothing terribly elaborate, just a few words, a little image. I'd love to have done that for her. I enjoy doing signs, but I just can't. Another person wanted me to build a custom exterior door. Theirs had been damaged by a fraternity member, shall we say, and I can't do that. I would love to do that. My schedule is just non-existent right now. So the work is out there. Hang your shingle, build your website, and jump into this either full-time or part-time. I thank you for listening today, and as always, comments, complaints, criticisms are always welcome. Contact information in the show notes and on the website, Working at Woodworking. And until next week, happy woodworking.